Hello everybody, my name is Luke Menzel. I'm the CEO of the Energy Efficiency Council, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to today's special webinar in which we're going to introduce you to a new measurement and verification course which has been developed by our own Bruce Rowse on behalf of the Efficiency Valuation organisation. I can say I'm pretty excited about this. New measurement and verification courses don't come along very often. And it was one of my first jobs when I joined the Energy Efficiency Council back in 2012 to help run and deliver and get trainers out from the US for the very first certified measurement and verification professional course. We now have hundreds of people that have been through the CMVP training here in Australia, but it's been something that's been pretty well understood that while the CMVP program provided a fantastic foundation, there was room for more professional development in this space. And I'm actually really proud that it's an Australian trainer, Bruce Rowse, that has worked with the EVO to take the next step. So at this point, I'll introduce you, Bruce, who is going to be my co-pilot on today's webinar. And firstly, congratulations for getting this new course done and ready to launch.
Thanks very much, Luke. It's great to be back here again, having a chat about M&V. I enjoy talking about M&V. So yes, EVO's had this course in progress for quite a while, and I'll share a little bit later about the Certified Energy Saving Verifier certification, which has been, this course feeds into that certification.
Well, that's certainly true. My understanding, and you'll take us through all of this, Bruce, is that this is one leg of the Voltron, which is being formed of that CSV course. But we'll take it step by step, just to give everybody on the webinar a sense of the program today. We will hand over to Bruce in a moment, who'll give a high-level overview of what we're trying to do with this new measurement verification course. Then Bruce and I will have a conversation about each different module that is covered over the course of this workshop. And then there'll be an opportunity for a Q&A with the participants on the webinar today. I note that there's a bunch of people on the webinar today listening in live. There are also a lot of people that couldn't make it today, and so we will be making this recording available in due course. So with that, Bruce, we have 45 minutes, so why don't we jump straight in to your presentation.
Great, thanks very much, Luke. Let me just share my screen here. Okay, so this M&V planning course is aimed at those who've completed the M&V fundamentals training. That's the training that precedes the CMVP exam. And the course, as I suggested, is part of the Certified Energy Saving Verifier certification. This is still under development, but to become a CESV, or a Certified Energy Saving Verifier, you will need to be a CMVP, have attended the M&V Planning and Practice course and passed the exam, and have also attended a course on investment grade auditing and passed that exam. And once you have the three of those, you can become a Certified Energy Saving Verifier. Now, the aim of the CESV certification, the reason it's been developed, it was spearheaded by Tom Driesen, who is the past chair of EVO. The key problem that this certification is trying to address is to give confidence to financiers of energy efficiency projects that what they are financing will deliver a return, that the return will be more or less within expectations, and that there are robust procedures in place, I guess, to verify that. So it's drawing on two skills: the ability to undertake measurement and verification, and the ability to be able to assess an energy audit, which is the investment grade audit course. You don't necessarily have to do the audit, but you have to be able to assess an audit and verify if the savings measures put forward are fair and reasonable and are likely to be achieved. So there's the three legs of this certification. So not only if you got the certification, not only would you be recognised as an expert in M&V, you'd also be recognised for your ability to assess energy audits and to assess whether or not the savings will be achieved or not. And then you put that package together, and that should give confidence that an energy efficiency project can be financed. So the CSV is a very important part of EVO's strategy moving forward, where EVO wants to create a world where there is confidence in energy efficiency projects. And this is a very important part of their strategy, and I think it's probably one of their key, if not their key area of focus, is pushing this forward over the next couple of years, this certification. So why then do we need an M&V planning in practice element to this? So I'm going to go through just 3 reasons for this. The first reason is that the fundamentals course, which probably most of you on this call, on the call have attended, the fundamentals course that precedes the CMVP exam, it's focused on the theory. It only just dusts some topics. It only really dusts the topic of statistics. It only dusts metering. But fundamentally, this course tests your knowledge in the exam, but you don't need to prepare an M&V plan. And in actual fact, it doesn't really assess your ability to prepare an M&V plan. This course then aims to address, so out of this course, you actually have to prepare an M&V plan, and you get lots of practice preparing M&V plans. The course also addresses a problem that I've seen and I've heard of from other countries where M&V is actually not very well done. So even though it's a CMVP doing it, because they haven't actually perhaps had a lot of experience, or perhaps they're not subject to a rigorous audit program where the M&V plan is rigorously assessed, you can get some quite poor quality M&V. And it's not just overseas, I've seen it in Australia. So for example, I've seen an M&V plan say we'll do option B and not really be well supported by data, and then the M&V report comes out and they've used option A. Well, that's not really adhering with good M&V practice. So we're trying to address some of these issues by really focusing more on the M&V plan and how to do a good M&V plan and to improve the quality of that. The third reason is that unless an M&V practitioner has access to those with experience around them, they may struggle to deal with common challenges. So if I think of Australia, there's several companies which do M&V, and they've got lots of people in those companies to kind of support and bounce ideas off. But then there's a lot of other practitioners who may be just working by themselves, or can't necessarily tap into that expertise. So, and they may come across some challenges and don't know how to deal with them. So in this course, there'll be a lot of time for discussion around challenges and how to deal with them. And we actually start off by looking at some of these challenges. So the course itself has got the following areas that it covers. It looks at practical M&V challenges. We look at an IPMVP adherent plan in detail. We spend a fair bit of time doing M&V calculations in practice, and that's basically a lot of practice. This course is very practical. It's focused on you doing a lot. So there's a lot of exercises inbuilt in the course, and so you're going to be both developing an M&V plan in detail, but you'll also be given some scenarios and required to develop plans out of that. So I think there's at least 2 examples where you sort of have to go from start to finish during the course. And then, of course, that gets critiqued and reviewed. Then we look at M&V plan verification in practice to finish off. So M&V plan verification is a pretty important step, and often it's missed. And I've seen cases where, proper verification of the plan hasn't been done. In actual fact, it was one of my first introductions to M&V where I saw this. And the energy user in this case, I think was in quite a difficult situation because of that, because they weren't able to verify the plan. They took the plan on face value, and they didn't appoint an independent verifier, and ultimately actually paid quite a price for that. So that's just a quick overview of the upcoming course. I think I'll stop sharing and go back to you now, Luke, for any questions.
Thank you, Bruce. Look, what we're going to do now, as I flagged, is we're just going to go through each of those core elements of the course, and Bruce will start with that second element, practical M&V challenges. And am I right in saying that in the CMVP course, it's necessarily focused on the theory of M&V and giving the students an appreciation of the theory at a high level? And in this new course, you've got more time to actually think about how that theory can be applied and some of the challenges in applying that theory and how they can be overcome. Is that what that module's about?
That's a really good overview, I think, Luke. Yes, we're starting off by looking off up at, what are these challenges? So we look at in this sort of section, we try looking at three different scenarios where M&V is typically done. So it's done for energy performance contracts. It's done in the energy efficiency schemes like we have in New South Wales and Victoria.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also ad hoc MV, which I've also seen as well in Australia, where it's not really part of an M&V, not really part of an EPC. It's in Queensland, so it's not part of a scheme. But they're just interested in trying to establish, well, has this project work? And we look at the challenges in those three particular scenarios. Now, I have to say that the course is actually probably a little bit more weighted to EPCs because that's where there is a lot of global interest in M&V. So it's probably a little bit more weighted to EPCs than it is towards the energy efficiency schemes. But we're looking at some of those challenges and then how to overcome them. I think it's probably the next module question that we address, the plan in detail, where we actually flesh out some of the detail that's covered in the actual CMVP course itself.
And so that next module, IPMVP adherent M&V plan in detail, that's a deeper dive on the M&V plan itself than you're able to do in the CMVP course.
That's correct. It goes through chapter 7 of Core Concepts 2016 in a lot of detail.
Mm-hmm.
And not all of that is actually addressed in the course, in the initial course. So we go through it with a fine-tooth comb. And we're, of course, looking at those principles, those 6 principles. I don't know if people on the call can remember them. I struggle with myself sometimes, but you've got to be accurate, complete, consistent, conservative, relevant, and transparent in the way that you do M&V. So we go through that, but really going through it in a fine-tooth comb, and at the same time looking at examples and developing your own examples as you go through.
That strikes me as incredibly helpful because, if you don't go through at a level of detail and have those practical examples, they can almost be motherhood statements, right? Those words, it's like, oh, who could disagree that those words are good things to pursue? But you actually really need to think about what that means in the context of M&V, right?
Exactly. So we're trying to avoid those motherhood statements, and also I think an important part of this is being able to communicate with your clients about the value of M&V. And I had a 4th point I was going to put at the start instead of 3, but I decided 3 are easy to remember. My 4th point would have been, I think that M&V is undervalued. Yeah, and I think one of the things sort of underpinning this course, it's not overt, but it's how do you communicate the value of M&V? And I think particularly with an M&V plan, when you're sitting down and presenting a plan, it's really important that you probably go through that quite thoroughly and avoid those motherhood type of statements. Say, well, this is why this is here. And if you're just putting in motherhood statements, like the client will verify change in static factors without specifying what static factors. You could end up in problems, and actually have seen cases where there are problems down the track. Yeah.
Ultimately, it's absolutely crucial for an M&V plan to have any purpose or value with it. You've got everyone bought in and kind of understanding it at some level, right? Because it's effectively a contract that everybody's agreeing what the parameters of that energy savings mission is, right?
Yeah. It's like that cash register where and it's important that the cash register is well calibrated. No pun intended. Sorry.
All right. So the next module, Bruce, is M&V calculations in practice. Do you want to take us through what you're covering in that?
Okay. So M&V calculations is something that a lot of people really struggle with. And in the CMVP, in the M&V Level 3 course before the CMVP exam, You know, we kind of go through it pretty quickly. We have an example or two, but there's not a lot of detailed time to answer questions and look at it in detail. There's things like Tstats. Um, some of you may have remember Tstats, and we address them, I think, pretty poorly in the CMVP training. Yeah, um, the and and you know, for me, this is one of the core parts of the course is understanding how to use the statistics well and not abuse them, because often they do get abused. Yeah, um, and you know, for example, I've seen cases where there's too many independent variables chosen. So you get a model that looks fantastic, but it's actually a rubbish model because it's what they call overfitted. Yeah. And if you took another data set from the baseline and applied it to it, you find perhaps quite big errors. So we look at that. We look at issues like effective range, which are a big issue in the scheme, in the schemes in Victoria and New South Wales. We look at that, and basically we give people a chance to practice and do more practice, and then get that reviewed. Yeah.
I suppose you know, one of the great things about the CMVP training is it's 2.5 days, and it's covering a lot of territory. But it does mean, by definition, that you can't go into a great deal of depth on something like M&V calculations. And so, for those folk that have been through the M&V training and feel like they want that next level of understanding, then this is a great platform for them, from digging in and really starting to feel what's meant through some of these calculations in their bones.
Yeah, yeah. And just to put it in context, the number of slides in this training is about equivalent. The total number of slides is about equivalent to just one module, module 4 in the CMVP training, and then the rest is practice, yeah, and discussion and more practice.
So that's M&V calculations in practice. The next section is M&V plan in practice, and I'm interested to know, Bruce, how is that different to the section 3, which is an IP MVP, here at MV plan in detail? Is it about, you know, those more practical case studies of how you would you develop a plan in real life?
So by the time we got up to that section, basically that section is one slide, and then I'll hand the class a scenario. Go and prepare the MV plan based on this. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, and I've got 2 or 3 scenarios up my sleeve. So,
so are they? Is everyone doing that individually, or are you doing that in groups?
No, that would be done in small groups. Yeah, yeah. I think to get that collaboration and interaction, which often is so important to training, and perhaps as homework, people can go home and try one themselves.
Well, the learning process as well, and you know, it's one thing to, particularly when you're trying to absorb a lot of information very quickly. It's one thing to trying to chunk through that yourself, but if you're doing it collaboratively and through conversation, and often, you know, there's a mix of skills and backgrounds in a group, you can get there a lot quicker through that group work, right?
Yeah. And just thinking out loud now, yeah, it'd be great if we have a homework assignment as well, where after you do it in the group, you go home and try and remember what you learned from the group and what you learnt yourself, and repeat it yourself. Because all this is very important, because your exam is you're given a scenario and you have to prepare an MNV plan all by yourself in the exam. Yeah.
Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. We're proving that this is a brand new course, because Bruce is still having ideas. We've got the course scheduled. So be careful what you ask, because you might be giving yourself homework assignments. So, all right. Well, that sounds fantastic and a lot of fun if you're interested in M&V, as we all are. The next section that it seems incredibly important to me, and I'm sure you spend a bit of time on, is the verification stage. How are you working through that in the context of the course?
Actually, it's actually pretty easy in the course. By the time you've gotten up to there, you should be understanding it pretty well. And the verification is basically just introducing you to using a checklist effectively for going through and verifying where a plan is compliant and non-compliant. Yeah, and it's a great revision activity as well, because you're given a scenario and you're given a plan, you've got to go through it. Is it compliant? Is it non-compliant? So I don't think verification is actually that hard, but there's a lot to check. So we're just putting a system in place, go through this detailed checklist to ensure adherence with Core Concepts 2016, Chapter 7. Yeah. Another thing that you do get in attending the course is you get this template for preparing the M&V plan. You get the checklist. So there's a few sort of resources that you get that you can take and and use yourself after the course.
So, Bruce, you mentioned that this is a stepping stone towards a certified energy saving verifier. I'll ask about that in a moment. But, for someone that's done the CMVP course and is considering doing this course, what extra will they get out of, spending their time and working through their exam? They may or may not want to go on to the CSV later on, but just from devoting the time and the energy and the attention to this particular course, what are they going to be left with?
They should be left with much greater confidence and ability to be able to prepare an M&V plan. Yeah. And I guess that's the key differentiator with the CMVP training. CMVP training, you're trying to understand the fundamentals. We look at a plan, and as part of an exercise, I have people preparing elements of a plan. We actually don't review that or do that in detail. This course is really focused on preparing a plan, and being able to review a plan. We also touched briefly on also M&V reporting as well, and how to review a report, prepare a report as well. So it's going a little bit beyond planning, also look at M&V reporting too. Yeah.
And so can you talk a little bit about the exam, like the CMVP course? It has an exam. Is it a similar sort of format, or it sounds like there might be a different format if you're asking them to address the scenario?
You're given, in the exam, you're given a document which outlines a scenario. You're given some data sets, and you're told then to prepare an M&V plan basically out of that. So it's no multiple choice question. The exam is actually assessed by a human, by another instructor. So it's assessed by an instructor, and you get feedback from the instructor as well as to what you may have done well, what you haven't done well. And the instructor, of course, will just go through basically a checklist to verify that the M&V plan you've prepared is compliant. Now, it's going to be interesting because this would be a pilot. We actually haven't tested this exam yet. It's quite hard to prepare an M&V plan in 4 hours. So those of you who are coming, you recognize that EVO is normally associated with challenging exams. I'm afraid this may continue with this exam. You'll have 4 hours to prepare an M&V plan, which if you don't know what you're doing, you'd struggle.
I suppose that the good news is everybody's going to be operating under the same constraints, Bruce.
Under the same constraints. Also, of course, they can feel free to use the templates that they've got during the course to do that. So,
Now, so we've talked a little bit about the exam. What about this pre-course statistics refresh workshop? What's covered in that, and what's the purpose of that?
Okay, so the purpose of that is for those who haven't done the course recently, have perhaps forgotten the stats. We're just going to refresh you on what was covered in the CMVP course, because I kind of assumed that you have the basic stats, that you can do a regression, that you understand basically the test of a regression. If I talk about coefficient of variation, you know what I'm talking about. So it's just making sure that language is right, and that you understand the basics of regression analysis.
I can imagine even if you're doing M&V plans relatively regularly, there might be some people that just for the avoidance of doubt might be happy to go through that refresher, as you say, just to get the language straight in their head before they hit what sounds like a fairly intense couple of days. Yeah. All right. Let's return back to the Voltron work that is being created by EVO with the CESV. Can you talk a little bit about that? I know our friend Tom Dreesen, this has been his vision for some time. A long-standing board member of the Efficiency Evaluation Organisation. You talked a little bit about it in your presentation, but and the CSV is a little way away. But in terms of that sort of pathway for professional development for MV professionals, what will the CSV do that CMVP is currently not doing?
I believe that the vision that the board have is, the EVO's board have, is really, I guess, unleashing more opportunities for efficiency by making it easier to get financing. And I think they're particularly looking at scenarios where there isn't a efficiency scheme around, like we have in, say, Victoria and New South Wales. So, and that's many countries in the world, and in Australia, it's about half of the population can't access an efficiency scheme here in Australia.
Yep.
So you know, because Queensland and South Australia don't have an M&V. Queensland, ACT doesn't have an M&V, I don't think. You know, you've got Northern Territory, WA, Tasmania. They're all out, basically. It's only Victoria and New South Wales. So it's really trying to get people trusting in M&V, like, you know, trusting that the measurement and verification will be rigorous, and trusting that the actual audit has been well done. And it's a focus on what we in Australia might call a detailed feasibility study, or the Americans call it an investment grade audit. You notice I used the word investment grade audit before. During the planning and practice training, we actually go through the components of an EPC in a bit more detail and look at this investment grade audit or detailed feasibility study, where you're supposed to come up with a pretty accurate estimate of the costs and benefits of doing the project. And basically a CESV will be able to critique that, and in doing so, give confidence to the financier that they can go ahead. Now, that actually raises quite an interesting question about the liability of the certified energy saving verifier. I would imagine that this certification, on the basis that it is going to be quite successful, in that being a CSV would be quite a heavy responsibility, because you know, there's a lot of money basically going onto your advice.
Yep.
So I see it as being a heavy responsibility, but also, I guess, a pretty good opportunity if you can be a part of, you know, helping more energy efficiency projects get off the ground because of that confidence in the advice that you've provided. Yeah.
And before you even said the word, what was sort of floating in my mind as you were speaking there, Bruce, was the word confidence. Yeah. And the energy efficiency services market lives and dies on confidence, right? And confidence that what is being promised will be delivered. And anything that we can do in terms of the professional realm and certification realm to give customers confidence, that's an absolutely fantastic thing and incredibly valuable. And so while I get what you're saying, that you know, there will be some responsibility associated with this. That's the case across, you know, many industries where there are people that take on the task of verifying effectively, whether it's in the financial realm or wherever else, that what people say is happening is actually happening, right? So I think that's very exciting. Look, thank you for a fantastic overview. We promised some time at the end of this webinar for questions. I do have a question from one of our webinar participants, and the question, Bruce, is what do you expect from the participants in terms of real life M&V experience? Are you looking for 3 years or 4 years, or what kind of training background? And while you're answering that, I'd encourage anyone else that's hovering in the background listening to our conversation, you can please throw questions into the Q&A tab down the bottom of your screen.
Okay, so in terms of experience, you need to have either be a CMVP in standing, or you need to have attended the CMVP course recently. Preferably you've passed, but it's actually not essential for you. You don't have to have passed to attend this training. Of course, if you want to get the CSV qualification, you do need to be a CMVP. So in terms of experience, how many years experience do you need? I would suggest that you've had a go at undertaking at least 2 or 3 M&V projects yourself to get the most value out of it. If you haven't even done that, you'd be welcome to come along if you had quite broad experience in energy efficiency. But being a practitioner's course and being very practical, I think the ideal student would have done a little bit of M&V, but not an enormous amount. Because we'll be teaching you, you know, addressing those challenges. If you've done a lot of M&V, you've probably figured it out by then. So I guess we're targeting those pretty early on, but they've got a bit of experience.
And I know that we do have students that go through the CMVP course that don't actually undertake the exam. they do it effectively as a professional development opportunity, but they're not necessarily, wedded to the idea of achieving certification, either CMVP or CMVP IT, as long as they've been through the CMVP fundamentals course. Are you open to people coming in as a way of expanding their knowledge without doing the exam?
Absolutely, absolutely. But they do need that fundamentals training before they come in. Yeah.
Well, while we're waiting to see if anyone else has other questions, I might just ask you, Bruce. Over the journey, we've had a lot of public servants, government representatives coming through and doing the training, not from the perspective of wanting to go out onto sites and work with clients and do MV plans, but to kind of get their head around the fundamentals of measurement and verification, with a view to appropriately applying those principles in program design, whether that's within the schemes or within state or indeed federal government programs. Is there value in this course for that cohort as well?
Okay, so yeah, if you're coming from, I guess, from a program administration perspective or even a policy perspective, I would see values in elements of this course. I think I'd see value in understanding the stats well, because often you're drawn on to actually critique what's been presented to you and understand it. I think I'd see a lot of value in the plan verification section of the course, because particularly if you're evaluating plans, that's fundamental. You should be able to verify it well.
Yep.
When it comes to understanding some of the challenges, I think that these are quite practical, probably, as I said, more focused on EPC, so they may not be relevant from a program administration perspective. But that could also be interesting in helping unleash the potential for EPCs in Australia, which could be a little bit constrained.
All right. Well, Bruce, we don't have any other questions in the chat, so we might leave it there. I think people obviously have the information they need. It's good to keep this short and sharp, which was the intention of this webinar. I just close by again congratulating you. I've had a look through the slides. Haven't sat through the course yet, but it looks absolutely fantastic, and a really welcome evolution of I guess the professional development journey that we have available to us, not just here in Australia but around the world, around measurement and verification. I wish you all the very best for the inaugural course, and yeah, proud to, at the Energy Efficiency Council, be partnering with the Efficiency Valuation Organisation to get this one out into the market first in the world. What an opportunity, Bruce, to be out ahead of the market. So looking forward to it.
Great. Thanks very much, Luke. Thanks, everyone.